1, 2, 3, 4.
Screen time, screen time, screen time, screen time.
It's my screen time too.
Screen time, screen time, screen time.
Hello, and welcome to It's My Screen Time Too, the podcast where we review the programming the other critics ignore. Stuff made for kids. Find out what to watch for family movie night, what to avoid altogether, and what you'll want to watch alone voluntarily. I'm Katie.
And I'm Deborah.
And I have 2 kids, ages 8 and 5.
And I have 3 kids. They are 14, 11, and 11. Today we are reviewing Inside Out 2. We're super current. It just came out. We're reviewing it because we review most of Pixar's big releases. We've reviewed in the past Elemental, Lightyear, Turning Red, and Soul. And we always have a lot to talk about because our opinions are often mixed when it comes to Pixar's feature films. We both loved the original Inside Out. I feel like this is the movie of the summer for families. And it's been a rocky time for Disney's heavy hitters like Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm. So it debuted in theaters on June 14th, 2024. It's 1 hour, 40 minutes long, not including previews. It's rated PG. It's the sequel, obviously, but the director is new. First-timer Kelsey Mann directed this film, and a lot of the core voiced cast is returning, like Amy Poehler, Louis Black, and Phyllis Smith. And then there's a lot of new talent to this film as well. So here's the almost comically succinct plot summary according to IMDb. Follow Riley in her teenage years encountering new emotions.
All right. Well, as vague as that was, we will, as usual, try to steer away from spoilers. But if some of them get sprinkled in there, sorry, grown-ups. Deborah, did you like this movie?
I did like it. Yeah, we saw it on Friday night. So right when it came out in a full movie theater. I think that's always fun to see a movie when there's a lot of people around you and you can hear other people's reactions. And I went with Tony and Nate, and they just both really enjoyed it. So that all adds to my positive feelings about Inside Out 2. How about you? Did you like it?
I liked it too. As someone who suffers from anxiety, I felt very seen. And I think my experience was probably similar to yours in the theater. We went Friday afternoon, packed theater, tons of kids my kids' age. So that helped kind of assuage any worries I had about the puberty of it all, because there were a lot of kids to give big laugh reactions to any of the gags that were meant for younger kids. And I think that really helped. So that brings us to our first big question. Why isn't this for grown-ups? What was hard for grown-ups to connect with? Because maybe it's not made for us. I put that maybe in there for a reason. I'm not leading the witness, but tell me your thoughts.
I mean, at first, when I see that question, it's like, who wants to relive middle school? And like the age-old middle school problem of like, who are your friends and who are you? And everything seems so fraught, and like the smallest little decisions kind of have the weight of the world on them. So like from that perspective, I don't know that I want to spend an hour, 40 minutes dwelling on whether, what's her name, Maya?
Riley.
Maya's the actor, is going to make friends with the captain of the hockey team or whatever.
Right.
But there's so much else going on. Like, it's like, that's just very surface level. That's just one aspect of the movie. So I don't really have a complaint about that, but that could deter a grown-up from seeing this, I think.
It's true. It is such a difficult time of your life, and you do just kind of want to forget that it ever happened and move on. But I wonder if the fact of being parents makes us revisit it in kind of a fonder way, or maybe gives it a little of that joy/sadness tinge that the original Inside Out taught us all about. I was worried that it would be too much making fun of what Riley is going through for the sake of the grown-ups in the audience. So that is what worried me going into it. I was also just worried that it would be too much made for us and there wouldn't be enough for 5-year-olds. But I thought there were still some good gags. and not just the ones from the trailer, although I do think to some extent your worries about the movie being over-trailered were borne out, because a lot of the laugh-out-loud funny kid moments were things that we had already seen. Did you feel that at all?
You know, I was surprised by, I don't want to spoil anything. I was surprised by the whole, I don't know, like Rick Moranis through the backyard scenes where they're like trying to get their way back to Riley's executive functioning lab, you know, like, so I was surprised by a lot of that. I hadn't seen that in some trailers, so I was worried about that going in, but there was like plenty for me to laugh at. And I didn't feel like this was a Pixar Soul,
right?
Where that is like a deep movie about heavy things. And like this is too on some levels, but like this is just a lighter take on it.
Agreed. I also don't want to give any spoilers, but there was a wonderful gag having to do with a children's television show in the vein of like a Blue's Clues or a Dora or the one closest to my heart, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. And my kids just died laughing at that, because the very idea that they at age 8 and 5 could be old enough to look down on a television show as being for kids younger than them was just the most hilarious thing in the world to them. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, totally. Tony and Nate really thought that was hilarious. I mean, I thought that was hilarious.
It did make me optimistic for Pixar and their hopes that they have pinned on this movie, just based on the in-theater reactions. Jay was sitting between his brother on one side and a stranger, a little girl, on the other side. And the little girl was probably just a touch younger than Kenny. And she kept turning to Jay and saying, "I love this part," and just like narrating all of her feelings about what was happening. And you know, that could go either way when you're sitting next to an 8-year-old. He could have gotten really frustrated, but he just took it all in stride, and it was very adorable. That's neither here nor there. I just had to share it.
Oh, but that's cute. Really cute.
Why is this movie for grown-ups? What was there for us to grab onto, even if the property wasn't explicitly made for us?
Well, there's the humor, which we've been talking about. I also think that just the exploration of how your emotions affect your behavior, and this film introduces more complex emotions than the last film, is good for anybody of any age. Like, I know somebody who works as a mental health therapist, and she told me a long time ago that she recommends to her adult patients that they watch Inside Out as like homework for therapy.
I love that.
Because it just does such a good job of capturing like the little internal wars that are going on in your like head and your heart about how you react physically and emotionally to the world. So this was great. Like, we got anxiety, which is a huge one, envy, which is and embarrassment. Like, there's so many good new characters.
I know, all of the ones that I relate to more primarily as a grown-up than I did as a kid. But you're so right about therapy, because so much of therapy is learning to name the emotions you're feeling, and Inside Out really does a great job of training you to do that. Oh, I'm feeling sadness right now, and that's okay. And then we move forward, right? Should we get into the weeds a little bit?
Yes.
Did you have a favorite new emotion?
Ennui.
Maybe.
And embarrassment. Oh my gosh. Tony was wearing a hooded sweatshirt in the theater. So like throughout the movie, he kept like pulling it over his face. Just like embarrassment. And I was like, it would be such a good Halloween costume. And he was like, "Oh, that's an easy one." And I'm like, exactly.
Yeah.
It's the best kind. Oh, and then, nostalgia.
Nostalgia was so adorable.
Yeah. So I guess I can't choose my favorite new emotion. I liked them all.
Yeah, I also wrote down embarrassment and ennui as my favorite. Nostalgia we didn't get very much of, but maybe, as with actual nostalgia, it was the perfect amount.
I think it was the perfect amount.
Since we're talking about characters, did you recognize the voice of Bluefy, the Blue's Clues-esque character they introduced?
Yes, it's Ron Funches from Loot.
Yes, a favorite of ours. I was so happy to hear him and to recognize his voice, because usually that's Kevin's job when we're at animated movies. He gets the name of the voice actor immediately. It's very impressive, but I got it that time and I felt great.
Yeah, he was so good. And that was such a funny, I don't know what to call it, feature of the movie. I loved those scenes so much. So Maya Hawke is in a lot of stuff right now.
Is she? I only knew her from Stranger Things, which I like her in that franchise a lot, but that was my only other touchstone for that actor. And she plays Anxiety.
I didn't do my research, but I feel like her name is zeitgeisty right now. But I also liked Io Adebari, who played Envy. I could have used more of her as the voice actor and as just an emotion that plays a big part of being that age. What is Riley, 13?
13, yep.
Yeah.
I thought that was the hardest character line to walk, was differentiating between disgust and envy, because I feel like they were in a lot of ways very similar. So that maybe could have used a little bit more clear-cut definition.
Yeah, and those emotions are not at all similar.
You're right. It's just because they had given this prissy cool girl vibe to disgust in the first movie that they couldn't go back on, that it just made envy kind of a hard addition, I thought.
Okay, I think that the deep dark secret character, who was only in a couple scenes barely, sets us up for Inside Out 3.
I hope so, because I quite enjoyed this movie, but given the timeline to come along with Inside Out 2, I'm a little worried about a third installment. I mean, Hollywood loves an IP and we love to milk it for all it's worth, and Disney is kind of doing the shift where they're really, really focusing on sequels to try and right the ship financially. So maybe we will get one sooner rather than later. I would be hopeful about that.
I would like one where we see Riley graduating from high school and leaving home, and then it's centered on the mom's emotions.
Oh.
Because I feel like the timeline that would coincide with my kids getting to that age. That would be great.
Take note, Pixar. Just make one for the grown-ups. It's okay. You've been tiptoeing in that direction for a long time. You can just go ahead.
I didn't rewatch Inside Out before this. Do we see the parents inside their heads in that movie?
It's the little blips you get within the credits. So you get a couple glimpses of the insides of other people's minds. So you get the inside of Riley's mom's mind and her dad's mind, and then there's a boy she runs into and stuff like that. So we get them for very brief moments. I'm curious if you had any thoughts on whether or why the puberty story that they told in this movie was easier than the puberty story that Pixar told just a couple years ago in Turning Red, which was another movie that we enjoyed, but had, I think, a more difficult critical reception, and definitely has not really made it onto the repeat viewing list in our household in the way that I feel sure this movie will.
Are you familiar with the books That's So Amazing, that series?
I'm not.
Okay, so it's these books about puberty and sex education, sort of. And there's 3 that we have, and they're for different ages. And the first one is for really little kids. And the second one is for elementary school. And then the last one is for kids who are actually puberty age.
This sounds
maybe
amazing.
10 to 14. That's So Amazing is the series. They are. And they're really good. And the first one in the series, it's for really little kids. And it's just gives very broad strokes. As you grow up, your body changes is the gist of it. So I feel if kids have that just broad knowledge, this is fine. And I think this is more dealing with emotions and not so much body, whereas Turning Red is really more about menstruation for real. And I don't know, I think Inside Out 2 is just better for a general audience. reboot. I don't know.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. And I think the issue is specificity over generalities.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just defining the emotions that come along as you age, as opposed to Turning Red, which was a really lovely story, but it was obviously grounded in a lot of personal experience. It was set in a very specific time, the early 2000s. It was dealing with a lot of things that were popular in the early 2000s, like boy bands. And in addition to being primarily about menstruation and becoming a woman, it had this additional freight of exploring the mother-daughter bond, which is a lot to put on a movie for kids. So I think this was a lot more successful.
Would you want to talk a little bit about the anxiety piece? I saw somebody I know on social media post about how they suffered from anxiety, and this is like their movie written for them.
Yeah, it was really relatable. I feel like some movies I struggle to come up with cogent, thought out critiques of because I'm too busy feeling them. And that is to some extent what happened while I was watching this. Like, I sat down to write out my favorite gags because at the time I was so conscious of Kenny and Jay's reactions that I wanted to make sure that I pointed out the things that were still funny for little kids. But then I found that I couldn't really remember them after the fact, and it was maybe a good lesson to take notes, even if I'm in the theater, because I was feeling the presence of anxiety so strongly. I mean, I was crying through a lot of this movie. And just the depiction of how anxiety can totally take over and freeze everything in a seemingly intractable way was just done so beautifully, I thought.
Yeah, that really was great. And you see how, like, your thoughts are, like, so well-intentioned.
And it can seem totally rational. Anxiety's explanation for what she's doing there and her purpose in Riley's brain makes sense. She's planning for the future. That seems fine.
Yeah.
Until it's not. Just another side note about Halloween costumes. Continuing on to my family's recent Phineas and Ferb love, I got orange and white striped t-shirts for both of the boys so they could look like Phineas. And Jay happened to be wearing his when we went to see Inside Out 2, and that is also Anxiety's costume.
Oh, that's cool. Funny.
Did you get the feeling like we spent more time with Riley and seeing things from her perspective than we did in the original movie?
Well, hard to say since I didn't rewatch it. I did think that the hockey plot itself was very forgettable. Like, it could have been any middle school dilemma, which is kind of the point. It could have been about getting a good grade on a test or doing a group project or getting into the school play. So they made a specific instance very universal, which is like the brilliance of Meg LaFauve, who is the screenwriter. Like, she's very good at writing, penning a masterpiece.
I love that. Did you look up any of her other credits?
She's done a lot for Pixar. She has a really good podcast called The Screenwriting Life.
Did you have any thoughts on the look of the animation? Very similar to the original. I still loved the kind of fuzzy, inarticulate outlines of the emotions because I felt like that was very well observed for how emotions work.
I also liked how the animation changed when we go to the Bluefy parts. Oh gosh, we didn't even talk about that like video game character. And that was another piece where like the animation is different to represent him, and that was hilarious.
Yeah, my kids really liked that because there were some specific video game things. Like, he couldn't just walk through a door unless you positioned him exactly in front of the door because he would keep running into the wall. Just so well observed.
Speaking of kids, what do you think makes this okay or good for kids?
I loved that you brought it back to this series of books that break down puberty in a manageable and non-scary and not too detailed way for younger kids, because that's what this movie is, right? It's a puberty story about emotions, not about any icky physical changes that parents might not be ready to address with their younger kids. So I thought there was nothing in there that made it actively bad for kids, with the only risk being that maybe they would struggle to connect. But again, I thought there were plenty of gags. I thought it was great for kids. How about you?
Yeah, totally loved it for kids of any age, really.
What adult movie or show does this compare to?
I think it made me, no, I know it made me think of Annie Hall.
Ooh.
Because Woody Allen's whole shtick is about being neurotic, which I feel like is the 1970s term for anxiety, right?
I think there's a lot of common touchstones there.
And the kind of like addressing the camera and being very, I don't know, maybe even tediously self-analytical. So that's what it made me think of. How about you?
Well, obviously, as an anxiety sufferer, I immediately thought that the emotion that was missing from the group was the big depression. So I thought about...
Is that big dark secret?
Ooh, I don't know. I got the feeling like her secrets were a little bit more concrete, but I guess hopefully we'll find out in Inside Out 3.
Yeah.
But the two depression-related television shows that I thought of were You're the Worst and perennial favorite of ours, Wilfred.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Were you able to cast the gritty HBO reboot?
I would like to see Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke and Maya Hawke all in something together.
Oh, okay. Do you think you'd get a sense of estrangement between Uma and Ethan?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I want to watch it.
Okay, I like this.
Just read like a thing in the paper about how Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez like went to one of their kids' like graduation and did not interact with each other and sat on opposite sides. And like, one, why is this a news story? And two, I want more of that.
Okay, I like it. You want more messy celebrity divorce. I'm here for it.
But from like the inside the brain, inside out scenes of it.
I was still thinking about depression, and the actor that I would like to resurrect from the grave to voice depression would be Gene Wilder, specifically his kind of like weary delivery in Blazing Saddles as Jim. I think that voice would really capture depression well for me. Do you think it was better when we were kids?
No.
Agreed. We didn't have anything nearly this complex out there. It was all bloofy all the time.
And we were not supposed to like talk about or feel our emotions.
And we did very little talking or feeling about puberty either, for the record. So
Right. Totally.
Would you ever watch this alone voluntarily?
I don't think I need to watch it alone because one of my kids didn't even see it yet. And I would go see this in the theater again before the end of the summer.
I would not watch it alone again because it was too real, and you know how I feel about my feelings. But I will happily watch it again. I think, again, this one will make the repeat viewing list for us for sure. Ratings?
5 stars.
I think I could go 5 stars too. I really enjoyed this. See it or skip it?
Obviously see it.
See it.
Thanks for listening to our review of Inside Out 2. Next week, we'll be back with a conversation about screen time in the news. If you enjoyed our show today, please recommend the show to one friend you think would enjoy it too. Or 2 friends. We love growing our community of parents for sanity in screen time. Don't miss any of our up-to-the-minute thoughts about screen time. You can head over to our website and subscribe to updates, myscreentime2.com. Tune in next time for more real talk about the movies and TV we watch with our kids because we have to and sometimes because we like to.
Bye.
Bye.